Good morning, everyone. Well, welcome to Streams of Hope this morning. It's really great to be with all of you. I really want to encourage you this morning to stay in touch with the church on social media and to keep coming onto these streams every day at 11 a.m. live on Facebook and on YouTube. It's really great for us to be able to connect together in this way. And another thing that we have taking place every Sunday at the moment is we have our online service. From 10 a.m. we have Live Kids and then worship from 10:15. Both of those are just on YouTube only. And then at 11 a.m. we have our message and one or two things like our offering and other parts of our meeting like prayer time and such like. That'll be from 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube. And we really, really hope that you can always make a note of that to join us for that. Well, you'll see I've got a special guest this morning who most of you will probably not know. This is a really incredible guy. His name is Andy Yaxley, and he's actually my cousin, and he lives over in Salem in Oregon in the United States, right on the very west coast. So he's about 8 hours behind us in the UK. So what he's going to be doing is he's going to be sharing a little bit with us today about who he is and what he's doing. He's a really great guy to introduce to you. He actually works for an organization called YWAM, Youth with a Mission. And so I wonder, Andy, if you might be able just to share one or two things with us about yourself, about Andy the man.
Andy the man. Well, I'm your cousin, so that's an important
it's a good
point
start
to note. And even beyond that, our grandfathers were twins, so I guess technically we have about 25% of the same DNA.
Very much
so. Very, very linked. Yeah, so I grew up in England, in Norfolk, in Kings Lynn, not too far away from where you guys are right now. I have not for more than 9 months since 2003 when I finished college and went off to on my first mission trip. So yeah, I've been all over the world. I have a family. We have 3 boys, so we're an all boy family, which keeps me very busy and active and a little wild and crazy at times because there's a lot of energy in our life. And I love Jesus. That's probably the number one most important thing about me, and I love my family.
That's really great. I wonder if you could share with us one or two of the things that you're actually up to. I know you've been involved in missionary work in the States and in the Middle East for lots and lots of years. Do you want to give us a bit of a background about who you are and your missions work and everything like that?
Yeah, so I've been involved with Youth for Mission, YWAM, since 2003. Some of you might know that organization, others not. Sometimes we refer to ourselves as the best kept secret in missions because it's kind of like one of those, it's a very relational organization. So if you know people, you'll know it. If you don't know people, you may not know. But it's actually, in terms of field number of staff, it's the world's biggest missions organization, and literally all over the planet. Officially in about 180 something nations, but even in the nations we're not officially in, we typically have undercover missionaries working there. So I myself right now, I'm very involved in prayer ministry. I lead our intercession team here on our campus. We say campus because it's heavy training focus in this particular location, and so we do a lot of training. And then I'm also involved in a prayer initiative internationally with our Frontier Missions department, which is kind of raising up prayer for the world's kind of least reached peoples and to see them come into the kingdom. I run training courses here, which are for people that will move overseas, called the School of Apostolic Missions, where we train people in cross-cultural missions and how you stay healthy on the mission field, how you learn language and culture, how you minister apostolically, different things like that. That's a lot of my ministry right now. But for many of years, I've been focused on the Muslim world. We lived there in the Middle East for 5 years, serving there, and have taken many other trips to the Muslim world. So that's a particular focus of our ministry, and always will be. It's less so now because we're here and train people to go wherever they want to go. But it's amazing how many people God brings into my life that want to go to the Muslim world, and still the connections I can have there through WhatsApp and other social media. And yeah, it's an amazing time in history in the Middle East and the Muslim world right now. I might share a bit about that later.
If I can just ask you, so you're based over in the States, but you clearly have a big a passion for reaching Muslims, people in the Muslim world. How did that come about? Where did that passion sort of come from?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Like I think a lot of ministry, was kind of a journey for me. So I did my DTS, Discipleship Training School, in 2003. That's the entry level school for YWAM. Anyone that's a YWAM staff or long-term missionary of YWAM has gone through that program. And when I did it, I didn't know that I wanted to do missions long-term. I didn't know any of that. And God really called me to missions through that. And then kind of over time, he narrowed down my calling. So I came to Salem. I felt like I wanted to go to Asia. That was the part I had. I want to go to Asia. Didn't know where in Asia. And I meant the whole continent of Asia, not like a specific region. And but I felt like I wasn't ready. Came to America. That's where I reconnected with Caroline, my wife, who I met on my DTS, and we started dating. But through that, I was here, and God really emphasized and focused on unreached peoples. So, just real briefly, unreached people are people that live in cultures and countries and nations, people groups that have very limited or no access to the gospel. So maybe there's no Bible translation in their in their language. There's few Christians. There's no churches or limited churches. God, and most of Asia is actually some level of unreached. Different countries are. And then I was in a meeting one day, and God highlighted to me this region of South Asia, so India and the nations around India. And through that, I ended up going to Pakistan twice, and was planning on moving there. And then the whole team we were going to join started losing their visas and their rights to be there. And so we felt like at that point we'd been here in Salem, Oregon for 7 years. And the whole time had wanted to go move overseas. And so we just said, okay, God, we feel like we want to work with Muslim people. This door has shut. And unless you redirect us some other way, we're going to pursue this and we're going to move somewhere. And so we were like, what's a good place to join with YWAM? And we found Jordan was running a training school more about how to reach Muslims. We went there with knowing we were moving overseas and going to go somewhere afterwards, and ended up staying there for 5 years, working with various ministries there. So that's a story where God put a love for Muslim people in my heart through Pakistan and then through Jordan.
That's really, really great. And I can just see through I know you well, but you just have you communicating a real passion for the gospel, passion for telling people about Jesus. One of the things in the UK that's come out recently is that there's a very, very high percentage of people in the UK now who, at least in some way, not quite in the same way that you're talking, but would be considered to be unreached. There's so many people in the UK now who just don't know the story of Jesus through various different things. Even in the current situation, but even when life returns to normal, as a guy who's been involved in missions for so many years, would you be able to give us some tips, some ideas about how we could reach those people?
Yeah. So what I kind of how I look at it, because it's the same here in America, really, a little bit more of a Christian culture than England, and certainly in certain parts. But I'm in one of the least church states in America, so very much similar. And I kind of view it. It's not quite unreached, but it's like just without good access to the gospel. So that, I mean, because here in America, same in England, there are churches around, there are people around, there are resources in English, but it's like the gospel, it's not personal to them, and it hasn't been shared in a personal way. And you know, a generation or two back, you would assume a lot of kids would have gone to Sunday school, and even if they didn't, a lot of schools were still doing kind of Christian assemblies and stuff. So they had some tenets, and that's not there anymore. Like that foundation isn't there, so they live kind of a post-gospel understanding. They may know nothing about the gospel, or they know limited stuff. And so what I really, the biggest thing is reaching out to people in love. That's what we're commanded to do in Scripture. That's what we're asked to do, and that we always present love. And I think with people that are unchurched and don't necessarily want to come to church, church is not a comfortable thing for them. It's taking the church to them. So, you know, if we focus on church as a building and a place and a meeting, and it's all about that, we must bring people in. That's great for reaching certain portions of society. You know, still a great number of the older generations are comfortable and want to come to churches. But a lot of our younger generations or individuals that have actually been hurt by the church growing up, they don't want to come to church. So we've got to go to them with the gospel, which I think is the message of the Bible too. Like, church buildings didn't exist in the book of Acts. You know, that's a very modern thing. There's nothing wrong with having a church building, but we can't see that as the way to reach people. So, you know, in this time, it's online messages. It's asking people if you can pray for them. It's sharing the gospel, and it's developing an understanding that their view matters and their opinion matters. We don't just want to come to the approach the gospel as tellers. We want to be listeners and people that ask questions. Jesus always asked questions. And that's my approach in evangelism, is often asking questions, and you find out things. And I don't want to take the opposite approach where we're always listening and asking questions, and we see that because the gospel needs telling. You know, it is something that we speak out. So we do need to be willing to do that, but we've got to start in these places with questions and listening and understanding. They're trying to understand their worldview, so we can demonstrate ours. And also with that is also even a questioning of our own worldviews, so that we understand that none of us have a perfect understanding of the gospel. So that's something I had to learn in the Middle East, because it's such a different culture. The way I would explain the gospel is entirely different than how I would explain it in England or America. But it's the same gospel, the same message. It's just that, you know, the things that we talk about, and he removes all of our transgressions. He gives us justice, these kind of things. They mean very little to a Muslim. They want to know about how to deal with their shame, how God gives them honor. And the Bible is amazing, and it has all those stories in it, actually. So it's learning that even our own perspective can be warped or ineffective in communicating the gospel. So what is the core of the gospel message, you know?
That's really helpful, actually. So some of the things we can do is, even in a lockdown situation, we can reach out to people in love. We should seek to understand them and not just, yes, tell a story, but not just be people who are kind of banging them over the head with the story, but tell them the story, but actually listen to them, seek to understand what's important to them. And I guess with you know, we have so many, particularly in inner city areas. I've met so many churches now that are reaching out to Muslims now, and they're Muslims who are coming to the UK, and they're asking those very same questions that you're talking about. How do I deal with my shame and everything like that? And how from that kind of honor and shame culture. Are there any more kind of, sort of thinking specifically about lockdown, have you got any kind of wisdom about what people could do to really reach out to one another?
I think it's a season when a lot of people are hurting or suffering. You know, nobody enjoys isolation. It's kind of funny. Last night I had this conversation with my wife, because I'm an extrovert, my wife is an introvert, and she was like, just saying like, oh, this week it's kind of starting to hit me, the isolation. And I was like, well, yeah, I've kind of been there for about 3 days, 3 days in. And we're not the most isolated. We live on a campus. We have rules on our campus about, like, we're not coming within 6 feet of different people, but I can see people that are friends from a distance outside and that kind of stuff. And some people are a lot more isolated than that, especially the vulnerable or at-risk people that are really kind of isolating themselves. And so a lot of people are hurting. They're feeling that isolation. And for some people, that's actually a reality of their lives every day. A lot of people are relationally needy. Not necessarily isolation of what that is for some people, but the lack of friendship. And so being real friends with people, asking like, how are you doing in this situation? And I mean, I always ask people, how can I pray for you? Like, even if you don't believe in prayer, I believe in prayer, and I would like to pray for you. And I've had non-Christians respond to that, asking for prayer and different things. And when I do that, I try to always take the time to even listen to God and see if he might have a word, because the gifts of the Spirit can minister powerfully to unbelievers, and they can minister, you know, across online. I did that many times in the Middle East. I would pray for people over WhatsApp. I would give them prophetic words or whatever over WhatsApp. So I think, yeah, whatever resource it is, Facebook, WhatsApp, iMessage, whatever, like reaching out to people, a phone call, and letting them know you're there is a huge testimony to them that you care. And then from there, you can build out relationships. The Bible says so many things that are relevant to this season. You know, it talks about unity. So it talks about like actually relationships are important. It talks about not, you know, don't be anxious about anything, but in all things pray, you know, Philippians 4. So it has so many messages that are there for this season. But if we build that relationship and reach out in love, that's when we can find time for those messages.
That's brilliant. That's really, really helpful. Actually, there's some really real gold in what you're saying in terms of advice for us in lockdown, but also when there's so much of that stuff that will be relevant for when we're not as well in the future, and that great and glorious future when people can be together, which is great. I just wonder if you could share with us for a few moments about what's God's really put on your heart at the minute.
Yeah, sure. I got a couple of things, so just kind of focusing on what to focus. But I want to read out one passage for you from Matthew 9, 30, 35 through 38. So, and Jesus went throughout all the cities and villages, teaching in every synagogue and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. And when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like a sheep without a shepherd. And then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. And so I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts on that, because I think that this is time. We talked a little bit about sharing faith during this season. And it is really a season for sharing faith. As YWAM, one of our founder and one of the key elders in the mission is Lauren Cunningham. And he's had a sense for about 8 years, that 2020 would be a year of great harvest, the start of a great harvest. So it's going to go on beyond 2020. And he's not the only one that's had that sense. Many people, prophetic people, have said similar things about this kind of period. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that what is happening now is happening. We don't know how long it'll last and when things will open up, but I feel like God is preparing the harvest, and even that some of the harvest can be reaped now. But there's a couple of things that are very interesting from this passage. The first one is the word send, when he says send out laborers into harvest. Pray that God would send out laborers to the harvest. So that word is actually the same word that it describes in the Bible when Jesus sent out people out of the temple. So it's actually a very forceful word. It's not like this kind of God moving like quietly and saying, hey, James, would you like to go out and share the gospel with these people? No, it's like God forcing you out almost against your will. So that's how passionately God cares about the harvest. And then another thing very interesting about this passage is when it says, what the word pray that they use, pray earnestly, it actually uses a word that's not the most common word in Greek for pray in the Bible, where it's actually talking about kind of petitioning God with what our heart wants. And so what I think that's communicating, because it's interesting, this is clearly what God wants, because God wants people to go to the harvest. And we don't care as much about that as God does, even if we're very harvest-driven people. We don't care as much about that as God does. But it's interesting that he uses that word. So I feel like it's like God wants us to align our heart with his, so that when we pray for people to go into missions or into evangelism, then we care, it's coming out of our personal desires because we care so much about that and about them. So those are two things that I really see in this season. Let's align our heart with God's heart for the harvest, and let's be willing to be forced out by God, and pray that kind of passionate prayer that God would even move people beyond their will and desires to share the gospel. And so just to encourage you as a church too, in the harvest, I think this word is applicable in England, but also for the missions harvest. So I think it's important to align yourself with both of those things. So that, like we just talked about, this kind of post-church generation in England, I think sometimes the way we talk about Europe or America or the West It seems like it's less hopeful now, as the church is growing crazy in the global south, in Africa, Asia, etc., and seems to be dying in Europe. But I actually think there is a hunger for the gospel in Europe and in England. What people have become tired of is church and religiosity, and so we have to kind of weed those things out the way we talk, and really present Jesus and present the gospel to people, and demonstrate love and compassion. They're also tired of sometimes the political nature, with less of an issue in England, and more of an issue here in the States, but they're tired of the political agenda that can be attached to the way Christians see the world. And so, yeah, kind of rid yourself of those talk and really communicate the gospel. So be harvest driven for Lincoln and for that area around Lincolnshire, wherever you are. But then also realize that it's about the global harvest. The most responsive areas in the world to the gospel are always unreached areas. And right now in particular, it's the Muslim world. The fastest growing church in the world is in Iran. And also up there is many Syrian refugees that are incredibly responsive to the gospel. Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, many places that we like to think that we even might think, oh, that's not very fruitful ground. No, they are fruitful. And so encourage you to be involved in missions. You know, this passage talks about praying, and that's a great way to start, to pray for missionaries that you may know, to pray for nations that God would send people out to. I'll actually share, maybe make a share on your Facebook page or send it to James. I lead prayer meetings every week where we're praying specifically for unreached peoples. They're online, they're available. You can watch the old ones and join with us in praying. But it doesn't matter if it's my prayer movement or some other prayer movement. These nations, the Muslim world, great time for the Muslim world. It's Ramadan right now. Many Muslims are really seeking God in this season, and God will often reveal Himself in dreams and visions to them. So that's kind of my encouragement to be, pray for the harvest globally. Of course, maybe God would call you to missions or call you to support missionaries or be involved in short-term missions. Be open to all those things, and then be involved in the harvest in Lincolnshire. It's time for the global harvest.
That's brilliant. There's some such good stuff in there, and I feel really just from you speaking, I feel so challenged. And one of the things that I love about mission, and I really hope we'll see as a church, and one of the ways I believe that we're moving as a church is to not see mission as a department of the church, but it's actually one of the primary kind of areas in which we focus, which were all mission driven. When I was growing up in church, it was always seen as kind of, there's a bit of a corner of a room where it had a map of the world on it, and there were a few missionaries maybe who gone here, there and everywhere. And in reality, mission should be something you don't have to go off to the other side of the world. You don't need to necessarily do anything other than reach out to the people who are in kind of the sphere of your own locality, if that makes sense. Is that before we end our time together, have you got anything more that you just want to share with us?
Yeah, I think also the other thing I was considering sharing in this season is it's an amazing time to grow your spiritual depths with God. Yeah. A lot of you are going to be off of work, and I'm sure there are some that are still, some people, even myself, this has ended up being one of my busiest seasons of life so far, but for others it's not. And I feel like there's a real invitation to grow, particularly in the area of prayer right now, but in everything spiritual. So dive into the word, dive into prayer, dive into worship, because if we want to bear fruit, Jesus says that we don't bear fruit if we don't abide in Him. John 15. We only abide if we abide in Him, that's when we bear fruit. If we don't, we're actually dead and worthless, which is pretty harsh language to use, but that's basically what it says. And so that needs to be always our priority, always our focus. So spend time with God, and He'll drive that mission in you, whatever your mission is. I think that James is right. Sometimes we separate missions and missionaries and things. That being a missionary is a unique call, but everyone has a mission, if I can say it that way. So being a missionary means being called cross-culturally, and we need people like that. But having a mission, we all have a mission. The Great Commission that Jesus gave to make disciples in the ends of the earth and everywhere. So I believe that everyone should be involved in reaching people locally and also in supporting or praying for missions or going on missions internationally, and especially to places where they're not going to get the gospel without people going.
That's really good. I mean, I feel really, as I said, I feel really challenged by what you've said. So I really want to thank you for your time. Thanks so much for sharing with us today. It's been really, really great, and hopefully there'll be another opportunity for you to meet with us as church. In maybe even one day everyone will get to meet you in person, which rather than just on a computer screen, which would be really, really great. So our time together has come to a close. Really hope you'll join us for our next Stream of Hope. We'll be on Monday to Saturday, 11 a.m. every day on Facebook Live and on YouTube Live as well. Remember, online services on Sundays starting 10 a.m. with Life Kids and 10:15 for worship. They're both on YouTube only. And then on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, we will have our message as well and the rest of our service. So really hope you can make a note of those. If you're ever concerned with anything if we can ever help you as a church in any way, please give us a really quick call, 01522 694 694, or drop us an email with your contact details and your query at office@life-church.co.uk, and we would love to help with you, pray with you, celebrate with you, share with you, whatever it is we can help you with. So for now, it's goodbye from both of us, and we will take good care, and we will see you really soon.
Thanks for having us. Goodbye.
Bless you guys.